former President Obasanjo have said that Nigeria is sitting dangerously on a keg of gunpowder. Also, the issue of the subsidy plan, Labour and TUC have actually come out boldly to say that they are actually having a meeting to actually see what the president can do, especially the federal government, regarding this issue of the removal of the fuel subsidy, as workers are really lamenting bitterly. You're welcome to the Dailies on Echo Television International, where we keep you updated with what is happening from the Nigerian newspaper. I am Sela Elisha Dashim, and I'll be doing this with Rachel Tanzi. Good morning.
Morning, Sela.
How you doing?
I'm fine. How about you?
I'm great. Thank you so much. All right, we are live on Facebook and on YouTube. So please do well to drop your comment or your contribution on any of the story that is of interest to you this morning. And we can go straight into the paper, starting with the Leadership newspaper.
On Leadership newspaper, TUC gives federal government 2-week ultimatum on palliatives. And on MPC, CBN may raise rates today over rising inflation. More details can be found on page 17. We have trending, Obasanjo blames leaders for Nigeria's woes. And numbers, real estate gets 21.8 trillion naira loan in 4 years. You can find more details on page 2. Reps vow to recover $9 billion gas flaring fines from airing oil firms. And on Adamawa wreck, let tribunal decide my petition first, Binani tells court. The big story on Leadership newspaper coming from the National Assembly, furor as Lagos reps pick 4 juicy committee chairs. Bichi, Tunji Ojo, Benson, Raji, Adeyemi for appropriation, Works, Defense, House Services, and Agri chairs. Betara reject Wars Committee chair, group spoils for showdown. You can find more details on page 4. IGP insists on withdrawal of mobile police from VIPs. Leaders have failed Nigerians, says Obasanjo. You can find the details of that statement on page 6. 4 suspects over plot to attack Atiku and others, and you can find more details on page 7. And we have the NYSC, a picture story showing the NYSC Director General and Brigadier General Dogara Ahmed addressing corps members at the orientation camp in Uku yesterday. You can find more details inside the paper, and that's all the news on Leadership newspaper.
Let's take a look at this day newspaper. Police arrest 4 suspects in plot to attack Atiku and others. With the right of flowing that story, PDP demands inquiry. Frank seeks security beef up around XVP. You can find more of that story on the front page and on page 12. House vows to recover $9 billion gas flaring fines imposed on oil companies. You can read that story on page 8. TUC gave federal government 2 weeks to conclude negotiation over the subsidy. You can start reading the story there and continue on page 12. The big story coming from the former President Obasanjo. Nigeria is sitting dangerously on keg of gunpowder, says government driving people into poverty through poorly managed good policies. Declares nation has disappointed Africa and the world. Prides self on recruiting some of the best hands. You can find more of what the president have to say regarding all of these on page 12. And also we have arms proliferation sustained by absence of punishment of offenders. You can read that story on page 28. We have a picture story here showing the 13th annual GTCO Autism conference. You can find more detail of all the story inside the paper, and that's all in this day newspaper.
On Nigerian Tribune, police arrest 4 suspects over attempted attack on Atiku's residence. 1 suspect confessed being a Boko Haram member. Owolowo Dosume to chair Odua's Investment Foundation Advisory Council as company set to launch Foundation Inauguration Council July 27. You can find more details on page 4. Nigeria has disappointed itself, Africa, and the world. A statement coming from former President Olusegun Obasanjo. You can find more details of his statement on page 18. Kwara governor approves 10,000 naira for workers, hazard allowance 100% comments for doctors. First female Yoruba for Professor Olutoye dies at 87. Tinubu paid tribute. More details can be found on page 18. And the big story on the paper, how Tinubu can halt petrol pump price from hitting 1,000 naira, a statement coming from experts. And the writer says free market not synonymous with complete absence of regulation. Reps election tribunal sacks Labour Party's Okoli declares Elumelu winner. More details can be found on page 4. 4 injured as two-story building collapses in Ibadan. Reps vow to recover over $9 billion gas flaring levy from IOCs and others. Still on the paper, gory details of oil petrol tanker explosion. The writer under the story, how pregnant woman, 3 children were caught in inferno. 9-year-old boy trampled to death in Ishwin Meli, mother sedated. Police confirm 8 deaths. More details can be found on page 28. And we have a picture story, protest rock Benin over hardship caused by petrol price hike. More details can be found on page 25. And we can see, say no to continuous hike in fuel price. And we are seeing federal government allow the poor to breathe. Fuel price is choking us. And that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
Quite a caption, Rachel, looking at the
Yes.
issues coming in. And, what actually drew my attention on this paper, apart from the caption coming from the Edo State workers over there looking at protests, rocking. A lot of Nigerians have been pushed to the wall. We've seen on the paper, TUC are actually giving the federal government 2 weeks ultimatum to come up with something to actually cushion the effect. And we're seeing here that Kwara State again is surprising us on the paper.
Yes.
I remember on the paper previously where they told workers to be going to work 3 times in a week because of the issue of the hardship that has been inflicted on Nigerians because of that. And then they went back and we were saying that the governor didn't only tell them to go back to work, but provided, it might not be much, but 10,000 naira, hardship allowance is really something commendable, and we hope that it's not just on our papers, but that the workers of Kwara State will actually get this money. He's also considering even the medical field, talking about our doctors, about 100% or so. So I think this is really commendable, even though we've heard where some bodies are coming out to kick against states coming up to provide palliative for the citizens because it's the work of the federal government. But I do not think it is out of place if a state should come to the rescue of its workers. If you expect workers to go to work, then it's expected you do something. On my way coming to work this morning, I was kind of surprised. I said, was there a public holiday I'm not aware of? The road seems cleared, Rachel. A lot of cars have been parked. People have actually, gotten into using their Lexus kind of way to say it, but it's really sad, and I hope something is being done. We've seen that the NLC have been pushed. They are tired of all of these things, and TUC are saying they have given the federal government enough time and they are not doing anything about it. It's quite sad because one thing I'm always afraid of protests is the fact that it's always peaceful, but then somebody somewhere tend to take advantage of it, and then before we realize it, it gets out of hand, and then hoodlums take advantage of it. People lost their life eventually and all of that. Just yesterday we saw about the 103 #EndSARS victims that will be buried and all of that. And this was a protest also that started peacefully. Nothing until something somewhere went wrong, and then boom, we saw what happened. So I just hope that the federal government truly will actually hear the cry of workers, hear the cry of Nigerians. We're seeing even the former presidents coming out to say that we are sitting dangerously on a keg of gunpowder. You could tell that a lot of things is not going, even though he's priding himself that he had the best hands. But a lot of things are not going well. And this is where I think we need to call back our former leaders. How did you tackle certain things? Of course, he's applauding the fact that our policies are good, but the timing are mostly wrong. The implementation is not being carried out properly. So we hope that truly something is being done, because not only everybody in Nigeria is feeling the pain. We saw in the paper there we no longer have middle class. It's either you're poor or you're rich. There's nothing like middle class anymore. So it's quite sad. So I hope that the government truly will do something about all of this.
Yes, Stella. Any state that is capable of helping its workers should please go ahead and do that. Now, for Kwara able to go 10,000, if for other states they're not able to go that high, because we've clearly stated it and we know the situation that most states are in, having a high debt profile. A lot are not able to pay workers their salaries, and a lot have not even implemented minimum wages and all of that. But then if you are able to step in, it doesn't matter, like we keep saying it, nothing is going to be enough to help Nigerians with the hardship as it is now in the country, because it has kicked in so hard and is left, right, center. Every good and service, plus food, plus services you paid for, every important thing has gone high. So there is not going to be any amount good enough that will be able to take away the hardship. But whatever a state can do to come in to reduce the hardship at the state level, then they should go ahead and do that, and then it will go a long way helping, while we wait for the federal government to do their bit. And then we expect the most from the federal government. As we can see clearly, these are decisions at the executive level that down at the state level to the local government level, people are feeling it hard. And I don't know why we just keep buying time and saying we're giving 2 weeks. It was 8 weeks, and now we're saying they're giving them 2 weeks ultimatum and all of that, Sele. This back and forth makes me see a nonchalant attitude towards the government and whoever other bodies in charge to make sure that palliatives are starting to go outside there. It's almost like you're adhering to what the government, and then the position in which you are, which is for the voice of the people, it feels you're not even doing your job anymore. Why do you keep buying time for the government? Why are you not out there making demand? 2 weeks is too long, Sele. You've already started making plans. I keep saying it. Fuel subsidy removal didn't start with this administration. It was already in motion from the previous administration. It was finalized by this current administration, but we've already started making requests from the World Bank for this palliative with the then Minister of Finance, and now it is in place. So what are we waiting for? Why are we treating it as if it's just something that landed on our doorstep without us knowing about it? And we keep buying time for the government, and nobody is finding it funny. People are suffering. It's not just even about not going out or working, but not even being able to afford basic needs, because the standard of living is really dropping, has dropped drastically. So I'm just really looking forward to things moving as it is, because the situation is it is a little bit complex, because there's so much chaos left, right, center. Nobody can really see where is the problem. And if we take this I believe at this point, it's the government just bit too much that they can chew, and I just hope that they can reduce what is on their plate and start going one after the other. Because yes, it is clearly good policies. However, once anything good is being implemented wrongly, it becomes bad automatically, and there's nothing you can do about that. Rather than retracing your step, going back to the board and seeing what you can fix. And that's what I'm looking forward to. Let these organizations, the TLC, the NUC, whoever are these bodies, stop buying time for the government. Go out there and do the needful, and make them listen to you and not you listening to them and buying them more time.
No, Richard, what I take from this 2 weeks ultimatum is the fact that it's exactly the 8 weeks from back then, the tune that was given. So the 2 weeks is exactly elapsing from the 8 weeks that they actually give the government to come up with sharing of that palliative. I was hoping that by now the committee that was set into reviewing that 8,000 naira that was supposed to be sent to 12 million households, supposed to have, submitted their report on what they hope to do. What is the review right now? Are you giving 10,000 naira? Are you giving 20,000 naira? What happened to the $800 billion that the World Bank gave? This is not a loan. This was palliative given by the World Bank for Nigeria. What is happening to that money? It has been given since. And just like you said, let's not make it look like if it was just its administration. But the question here is that what plans was on floor before this implementation? Most of the time we're so quick into moving into making a policy, implementing it, and then we don't sit back and look at the long-term result. How would Nigerians cope with this? Yesterday we saw in the paper when Rwani is saying from 2024 is when we are going to feel it. But what happened before 2024 is the question Nigerians are asking. And no wonder we're seeing these are saying that say no to the continuous hiking. For of course we do not want the hike. Nigerians were happy when they removed the first subsidy because some people are benefiting. But from the way things are looking, Nigerians would prefer let them continue paying the fuel subsidy, because what difference does it make right now?
No,
So we just hope that eventually things will fall in
we
place.
so.
It's really our desire and prayer. Well, let's take a look at what the Punch newspaper have to say. Still on the big story, says subsidy pain. Labour talks tough. ASU protesters condemn relief plans. The writer following that, here we have Sanu. ASU says fuel subsidy unintelligently removed. NLC meets today. TUC reject 5% telecom tax. Plan tuition hike. Kwara Ogun rollout palliative. We've seen not just Kwara but also Ogun State have done something about that. You can find detail of that story on page 2. Coming from Obasanjo, he said most Nigerian leaders knowledge of development shallow, then we need to do something about them having a more in-depth knowledge about how to handle development and also things that concerns this country. So maybe he can lend our leaders some of his knowledge so we can have a better country. And then on Forex crisis, passengers groan as foreign airlines hike fare. You can find that on page 19. Navy won't stop burning vessel, ferry stolen crook. We saw that where the National Assembly were actually cautioning them to stop that. But here we're seeing Navy say they won't stop burning the vessels of stolen crew. You want to find out why they said that, you read more of that on page 12. And then we still have the pictures still showing us the protest taking place in Edo, Benin City. And then we have supervisor invigilator selling WAEC question online arrested on trial. This is coming from the WAEC boss. And I'm happy, Richard, this is not the first time. I mean, we've heard about selling of WAEC results far back, even while we were still in school. You wonder why you're studying, cracking your head until daybreak reading. Somebody somewhere has already gotten the question. And this is to show how our educational standard has drastically dropped. And so if this is coming from the WAEC boss saying supervisors and invigilators, I know of schools whereby when we've heard of schools where, especially during WAEC time, we see that core members are not even allowed to be around them because the school know the runs they run within the school, how they can get money from students and then sell them. Pass question papers. I wonder how these question papers get to be leaked out. But then this show us, exposing us to things that we have not been doing right or we have not been getting right over the years. Just recently we saw that of the JAM result and we asked question, how comes that we had a student having the capacity to be able to create an app? And that is to show that a lot of people have been doing it, but it was just unfortunate, or was it fortunate for JAM to actually, you know, being able to, you know, catch her and then probe into the issue, even though it's still going on, whether they will give her the permission to write JAM for the next 3 years or not, is what we do not know yet. And here we are seeing again the issue of WAEC, and I think this has been something that I have been familiar with. We've heard of students saying they've gotten it and I wonder how. But I'm just happy that the WAEC boss is coming out to say they have been arrested and they're on trial. And I think this is where we need a thorough check in our educational standard, because when we don't get it right at this primary level, that is why it's very difficult for the student to stand up right when they get to the tertiary institution, or even when they go outside the country. See, they're being deported back to the country because they're unable to stand up there. So I'm happy for issues like this, and we hope to see more probe being done, more trial, more arrests being done, because we really need to clean the system. We're cleaning the house as the president wants to. We need to clean even our educational standard to be, you know, up high, up there, you know.
Of course, Tele, when you allow your system to be the way it is right now in Nigeria, you just give room for corruption at every level. And trust me, it's getting worse by the day. We know that we are seeing it. We know how things are happening. Long ago, buying of results, selling of questions, exam malpractice have always been at its peak, and I can only imagine the form it has taken by now and what is going on in the educational system. And I keep saying it is we give room for corruption selling in this country. It's just so many factors in play that it's almost like it's difficult to seal one hole because another place will be leaking. When you seal this other place, another place will be leaking. When you seal, all of these things are many factors. However, it is something we can fight, because for people collecting money to sell results, when your question is the finances and the hardship in the country, which that is a factor that we cannot put out of play. And then secondly, when these people are caught, what is being done of them? Examples being made of them. Are we making our system so difficult for corruption, or do we excuse it and do we let it go? Because it is going from the top to the bottom, and then you can't even question, because the person who is in the position to probe is also corrupt. So the person is probing can also bribe him, and then they go scot-free. So corruption is just is at many levels, and then it worries me, because with the way we're going, the decay is just so much, and it is something we can take out of the system. No wonder, no matter how good our results is to study outside, you would still be asked for this foreign, to take foreign examination. You will go through it, because we are having a system that is not trustworthy. We can't even trust it, talk more of other people trusting us. And then you find out why are students having why are we having students finding it difficult to pass examination of school that you've gone for 6 years? You did from JSS1 to SS3, and you are faced with JAM. You cannot write. You're faced with mathematics. It's difficult, and these are things that you have been studying for 6 good years of your life. Then it shows that we need to step up with our curriculum, and then our method of teaching. It's not only that the students are unserious, but then there is a problem somewhere in the curriculum, in the method of teaching, in how we go about things. And these are all things that needs to be looked into deeply and be corrected. So there is a lot of work in Nigeria, because the more we talk about every sector, we see where the loopholes are, we see where the problem is. But I believe that these are all things that can be solved, because we have what it takes. We have the resources. All we need is the people that are in those key positions to stop sleeping and do what is required and expected of them.
Richard, that's why I said we need the cleaning, and the cleaning starts from the top, not just about the students that are eager to pass, but let's take a look at what is the method of employment of these teachers that we have in the school. I've heard of schools that especially they have mathematics seminar where students are being taught. They bring experts from different people who are really qualified, because over the year we've noticed that mathematics and English language have been a very difficult subject for Nigerians to pass.
Yes.
And you wonder, just like you said, I mean, you went through that school from JS1 to SS3. How comes it's difficult for? So something is wrong, just like you said, our curriculum. Something is wrong with our teachers. Something is even wrong with the school standard itself. Because we've heard of school where, especially when it comes to examination, parents take their awards out of the school to a passing center and wonder what is so peculiar about that passing center.
Place, yes.
Something is wrong somewhere. So we hope to see more being done, because I'm key about this sector. Reason why, because if this sector is fixed, every other thing will fall in place eventually,
Yes.
because that is the light of the nation. Take a look at any nation that is really doing well. Then take a look at the educational standard or the educational sector. You know that a lot has been done to that sector, and that is why every other thing will fall in place. Well, we hope to see them doing just that. And then let me quickly round up on the Punch newspaper. Pregnant women, children among Ondo tanker fire victims. This is coming from an eyewitness. We record the tanker explosion that took place during the weekend, and it's really sad. Also, we see 3 Ocean students hospitalized as gunmen open fire on barber's shop. You can find that human angle story as well on page 5. And that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On Daily Sun newspaper, Anambra joint security forces storm gunmen's den, arrest 9 recover vehicles. The big story on the paper, protest rocks Benin City over fuel price. Demonstrators say Tinubu's government choking Nigerians to death. President APC didn't promise overnight solution. A statement coming from Oshomole. You can find more details of the big story on page 6. Yakubu, INEC didn't receive direct funding from foreign development partners. Tribunal nullifies election of Labour Party's Okoli as reps member, returns Elumelu, and you can find more details on page 27. Reps rule out 6 legislative agenda promise to prioritize healthcare, economy diversification. NGE joins 50 other media group practitioners to endorse global principles for compensation by Google and Facebook. You can find more details on page 6. Again, hoodlums raise SDP Guber candidate campaign office. This happened in Kogi State. You can find more details on page 27. Atiku escapes dead in his Adamawa residence. 2 arrested. PDP demands probe. Still on Daily Sun newspaper, INEC can't explain Tinubu's victory, claims OB. This is still on the ongoing. Tribunal says 2 million votes from 18,000 polling units unclear. More details of what is being unfolded at the tribunal on page 29. At the downside of the paper, group accuses Odiomo of harassing staff after documents leak. This is on PAP. You can find more details on page 29. Still a picture story showing the protest at Benin, and that's all the news on Daily Sun newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the Guardian newspaper. Made in Nigeria smartphones fumble as we have the monthly importation hit 50 billion naira, and we have a breakdown of the critical metals in a smartphone: the touch screen, the microphone, speakers, vibration unit, the display, the electronics, the casing, and the battery. These are some of the critical metals there. And we've seen that made in Nigerian smartphones actually fumble as the monthly importation. So you want to know more about that, where we're looking at how we can increase our own tech industry here. So you can do well to read that on page 6. Akpabio eyes constitutional role for traditional rulers as Abbas commit to restructuring. Tribunal nullifies LP candidate election, declares PDP Elumelus the winner. You can find that on page 3. And on petrol subsidy, making palliative work for the people. What does that mean? You read that on page 12. Still on the issue of the mass burial, Amnesty International tackles Lagos government on identity of the #EndSARS victim. You can find that story on page 3. As creativity goes weary under guise of skit making pranks, you can find more of that issue for those who are into the entertainment industry. You can read that story on page 4. Nigeria has failed Africa. Poorly implemented policy drives citizens to poverty. Obasanjo laments. You can read that story on page 6, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On the Nation newspaper, Tinubu will face insecurity, says Akpabio. How we will end sit at home by state government. Resident doctors give conditions to halt planned strike. Tribunal sacks Delta Labour Party rep for Elumelu. You can find more details inside the paper. Foreign inflows rise by 70% in the second quarter of this year. NGX report retained funds hit 44%. Cultists kill inspector in Lagos. Edo government begins work on 19.6 billion naira hotel. More details can be found on page 6. The big story on the Nation newspaper: subsidy removal. More states roll out palliatives. Kwara, Ogun, Imo announces support for workers and citizens. Jigawa boosts farmers and others. Trade Union Congress seeks quick action. Why industries shun discourse by experts. NERC criticizes high electricity consumption rate by household. At the downside of the paper, Amnesty requests inquest into bodies for mass burial in Lagos. More details can be found on page 25, and that's all the news on the Nation newspaper.
Right at this moment, let's just take a break so we can let you chew the story, what the former president have to say. And then we're having TUC giving the federal government 2 weeks ultimatum. Also, we've seen that Labour are actually resuming a meeting today. So let us keep our fingers crossed and see what that meeting will actually be all about. When we come back, we will open the phone line. Please stay tuned. Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, it's still the Dailies on Echo Television International, where we keep you updated with all that is happening on the papers. Before we went on the break, we're looking at what TUC is saying, the protests that rocked in Benin City in Edo State, and also we're seeing that even Amnesty International coming out to talk about the 103, mass burial that is actually taking place in Lagos State. So these and other stories are what we have been looking at on the paper. We'd love to hear what your contributions are concerning any of the story. Our number is displayed on your screen. Please do remember to turn down the volume of your TV set and also to be very civil with your language. And please, at most, you have just a minute to air your views, as other viewers will also, callers will also like to call in and air their view. I still have Rachel Tenze with me in the studio. Thanks so much,
You're
Rachel.
welcome, Selen.
All right, let's take a look at the next paper, which is the Nigerian News Direct before the calls start coming in. FCCPC issue warning to POS operators, threatening ban of errand operators. You can find detail of that story on page 3. On gas flaring, Federation account shortchanged $277 million. This is coming from the RMAFC. The writer following that story, reps to investigate 19 oil companies summon CEOs. Lawmakers vow to recover over $9 billion fines from oil companies. Expert call for legislative backing of adoption of oil tracker. You can find all that story on page 22. TUC threatened protests over federal government failure to conclude negotiation in 2 weeks. You can read that on page 3. Makinde appoint UI Professor Adeyemo as SSG designate. You can find that story on page 2. Talking about startup ecosystem, NITDAWO Global Tech Giant for support and collaboration. You want to know what all that is all about, do well to read the story inside the paper. And then coming from the MPF, no going back on withdrawal of police officers from VIPs. We've seen that back and forth. We're taking it, we're not taking it. And here the IGP in one of the papers said that they are not going back on withdrawing mobile police officers from VIPs. So if you want to know more about that story, you can do well to read that on page 2. On first subsidy removal, Ogun State government approved food and cash palliative. You can find that story on page 2. And then fear grip resident in Ogun as cultists strike again and kill one. This is really a sad one, where the government of that state is trying to do something. We're having cultists doing something. And I'm worried, Rachel, because it's in Ogun State we had the issue of those tramadol and the likes. Drugs have been landing there. Apart from that, we saw yesterday that was about 3.7 billion
Yes,
worth of tramol that was found in Lagos. And then this most times been Ogun State. And I'm quite worried what is wrong. Is it that these people find it easy to come through that state? I think the governor needs to do more to intensify security in the borders of that state so that people don't tend to tarnish the image of that state. While he's trying to do something from the state, somebody somewhere is trying to tarnish you. I'll be trying to make a lot of damage to that state. So we hope that he does something and the security agency of that state will come up and also come up with other means to make sure that lives and properties are being protected from the lives of cultists or any other person.
Selen, one major threat again in our society that is down to the road, that is eating up youth and all of that, aside from drugs and all of that, is also cultism. And it worries me a lot, Selen, because it is one thing that is almost no going out for it. Many life has been lost to it equally. Maybe they don't just make it to our papers or they don't go viral as other news have gone around, but then we have lost a lot of people to cultism, and it is worsening and growing stronger in the country as it is. And I said it yesterday, there's a lot of things that there need to be a state of emergency on.
Of course.
And just because they happen to be on the news once in a while doesn't mean that they are not growing strong in the background, doesn't mean that there are not thousands and hundreds of activities going on related to certain things, and cultism is one of those things. So I'm just looking forward to our security operatives doing covert operations on things like this, because yes, these people also are very covert in their operation and their dealings and all of that. So I need to see our intelligence, security and all of that at different level working to penetrate or infiltrate this system to be able to get these people where they are before they even come to the surface and all of that. And more awareness should be made in our university and school, because that's mostly where they get their recruits, let me put it like that. Young people trooping in the university, finding themselves associating with wrong groups and caliber of people and stuff like that. So yes, cultism is a threat, and we just hope that this is one of the things that we have our security agencies not sleeping on it, but that making sure they are not waxing strong, because whether we like it or not, they are related to all the drug crimes we have
Of course, of
around
course.
and then within the
We cannot
country.
separate
Yes,
cultism from drugs. They're
we
actually
cannot
related,
separate
of
the
course.
two. Yes, they
Yeah, you
work
know,
hand
Rachel,
in
back
hand.
was then where we are going to talk about cultism. It's just in tertiary institution, but it will break your heart to know,
Yeah,
Rachel, that even in our primary schools right now,
we are starting
we
to
have
have that
students are being
secondary school.
recruited in that way because they
Yes.
feel catch them young. You know, back was then they will tell you have courage to say no when you were about going to tertiary institution. But I think right now is when your child is graduating from the pre-primary, getting to primary one is when
True.
you have to start telling he or she basic
Exactly.
things. So I just hope that more will be done. You know, back then when we talk about Edo State, the first thing that comes to your mind was human trafficking. But then
Yes.
we no longer hear that. Doesn't mean it's not
It's
going
not
on.
there.
During the
Yes.
weekend, I saw a video of where kids are being transported right now. Richard, it will break your heart because these kids are being put in a sack.
I don't want
They
to
stop them from
imagine.
breathing. You get it. They stop them from breathing, and you wonder,
Scary
is
selling.
that the height of wickedness?
It
We're
is.
talking about children as little as from ages 2 to about 7 because they are still small, so they could actually tie them in a sack, so it will look more like you're transporting goods.
Good.
And it actually breaks my
Sad
heart. So I
selling.
hope that the government will do a thorough investigation to the people who are
We hope
behind all
so.
of this. And that's all on the Nigerian News Direct.
On the Matrix newspaper, no going back on the withdrawal of police mobile forces from VIPs. This is coming from Ebeto Kun. You can start with the details on the front page and continue inside the paper. Messi may make first start against Atlanta. This is coming from Martino. You can find the details on page 21. Sit-at-home order. Governor Umba shuts 106 shops and 2 banks. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 4. Attempted attack on Atiku. PDP raises alarm. 2 suspected Boko Haram terrorists arrested. Statement coming from the police. A plot to frustrate his move to reclaim his stolen presidential mandate. Coming from a PDP scribe. More details can be found on page 2. Atiku's aide accuses Wike Makinde of monitoring judges for Tinubu. This is still on the tribunal. And on 2023 election, IPAC rejects EU observer mission report. Still on the paper, economic realities will determine salary review, coming from the RMAFC boss. POS operators risk 1 million naira to 10 million naira fine, 3 months in jail over illegal charges. Troops raid suspected IPOP camps in Anambra, kill 1 and arrest 9. At the downside of the paper include pensioners in subsidy palliative register, federal government urge, and of course, Sele, we shouldn't.
True.
It's every Nigerian, and I believe everybody should be carried along, because let's not make it look like pensioners are no longer existing
They're
in
still
Nigeria. Yes,
Nigerians.
they still go on with life. They still buy food, they still go to the hospital, they still make use of the road and all of that. So yes, of course, this is important. I want to see that pensioners also are being included in the subsidy removal, because without it being mentioned loudly like this, they could be sidelined and not being considered. We see how they even struggle to get their pensions, talk more of palliative. So I hope this will be thoroughly looked into. You can find more details on page 3. We have a picture story showing Shettima for World Food Summit in Rome. Vice President Kashim Shettima meets the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, in Italy at UN World Food Summit in Rome yesterday. And that's all the news on the Matrix newspaper.
On the Daily Times newspaper, FCTA demolishes more buildings in Abuja. We've seen that apart from the Treadmill building, a lot of buildings that have collapsed are actually been demolished. You can do well to read detail of that story inside the paper. The big story for the Daily Times here says Nigerians living on cake of gunpowder. Obasanjo knocks Tinubu economic policy. You can find that. We've seen it on most of our papers. Leave positive impact in your host community. NYSC boss tell core members this is something that every time when you are serving is something you are being told to actually impact positively in your community. Talking about Ogun investigate origin of killer alcoholic drink. You can find detail of that story inside the paper. Auto crash in Asaba, servers victim in two. That's really a sad one. Also, you can do well to read more of that. Appeal court OK sack of oil company directors. You can start reading on the front page and continue inside. Unknown gunmen unleash terror. I take that story. Unknown gunmen unleash terror on Gakari Emirate. You can find more of that story inside the paper too. We still have the picture story of the Edo Civil Society Organization during the protest. So you can do out read any of the story that is of interest to you.
On New Telegraph, Nigerian investors in Delima over 234 billion naira rice import trapped in India. Foreign exchange revolution gains will boost banks' second quarter 2023 profits. You can find more details on page 25. Abbas to meet Tinubu over resident doctors' planned strike. Football star Musa slashes fuel pump price for 620 naira to 580 naira in his filling station. This is happening in Kano, and we know Ahmed Musa. This is the football star doing that. You can find more details on page 5. A statement from Ashemele Tinubu isn't a magician. APC didn't promise overnight solution. The big story on New Telegraph ahead, PEPT ruling, Atiku Obi moved to form alliance against Tinubu in APC. Atiku proposes one term to step down for Obi in 2027. Both parties will benefit from such measure coming from a PDP chieftain. We are not discussing alliance with PDP yet, a statement coming from Labour Party. Tinubu APC's dubious propaganda aims to confuse Nigerians. A statement coming from Peter Obi. You can find all the details on page 2 and 3. Tension as Asari parades fighters for Tinubu in Rivers. 43% of ages 5 to 11 children in Nigeria engaged in active child labor. And on subsidy removal, 70 billion naira palliative for senators sparks protest in Benin. Consider pensioners in palliative package, NUP tells the federal government. Still on New Telegraph, we await reports of 161 election observers, a statement coming from INEC. Armed personnel rigged for politicians at collation centers, a statement coming from CSOs. You can find more details on 3 and 4. Oil and gas among Nigeria's bottom 10 worst performing businesses, coming from a report which you can find the details on page 8. At the downside of the paper, we have a study, omega-3 rich diet may protect against hearing loss. You can find more details on page 7, and that's all the news on New Telegraph newspaper.
And finally, a report is agreeing with me that we have to do something, not just concentrating on our oil and gas, because it happened to be the
poorest performing.
So a lot needs to be done, Rachel, because they're finally agreed. So let's look into another sector that can fetch us some money. Talk about our rubber, talk about our agriculture, talk about other sectors, and let this oil rest for a bit, even though we are getting so used to it. But I hope that eventually, just like we're saying, it's a step-by-step process, not just overnight. But when we begin to introduce, no wonder people say, let's introduce the auto gas motors. Little by little, we're beginning to get used. I mean, the other countries are beginning to go into even using of water and the likes of that. So we can do that if only we are willing and determined. So I look forward to a time where we begin to have those type of cars to running on our roads very soon.
Like, of course, Selem, how does it make sense? It's common sense, which each time I say so, you say it's not common. How do you compare a sector that have hundreds and hundreds of different products to a sector that is limited in products. We are talking about agriculture and petroleum sector, gas and oil and gas sector. How do you compare agriculture with immense potential of over hundreds and thousands, let me not belittle what you can produce out of agriculture, to a sector that we have the crude at most, we have diesel, we have the PMS, and then we have gas, we have
Kerosene.
it's not more than 10, Sele, it's not more than 10 what you can get from crude oil, and you compare it. So of course we can only lie to ourselves, right? But the truth is out there that there are sectors that can perform way better, much more better. We have countries that are wealthy on just one crop, Sele, one crop. Talk more of other many crops. So yes, we can only lie to ourselves, but the truth is out there, and it's just left for the government to do what is expected.
Well, let's take a look at Daily Independent newspaper. Most leaders lack understanding of their position, coming from Obasanjo. You can read more detail of what he has to say about leadership. Global principles for fair compensation involving publishers, Google, Facebook, and other launch. Nobel laureate BBC, NGE, and others endorse principles. You can find most of that story inside the paper. TUC to Tinubu subsidy cut burden can't be on masses alone. The writer say asked him to cut the cost of governance. Over the time we've been seeing that on our paper, cutting the cost of governance. We hope our leaders will adhere to all of this. Also, we have foreign transaction on Nigerian forex rise to 145.1 billion naira in 6 months. You can find detail of that on page 29. No going back on withdrawing of mobile policemen from VIPs coming from the police. How 20 persons got burned in Ondo fuel tanker fire. You can find that story too on page 7. PDP raises the alarm over attempted attack on Atiku. And we have Kwara Governor Oki's palliative to cushion effects of fuel subsidy removal. And we have a story here that says subsidy removal, fuel station considers sack of workers. Protesters hit street in Bini, CSO lament the cost of living. You can see the picture story here, also showing here, see that home in Enugu State, which is the picture story, a peaceful march against that. There's been the back and forth coming from Governor Mba on that issue of see that home. Yesterday was it so? We saw how much they have lost in the past 2 years as a result of this see that home. So if you want to know more about that, you can do well to read inside the paper. The last story on the paper, we rely only on federal government funding to organize election, coming from Yakubu. You can find more of that on page 29. And that's all on Daily Independent newspaper.
On Voice of Liberty, Boko Haram, IPOB, ESN are afraid of Labaja, El Rufai declares. Federal government to probe Malani over 5 suspicious mega deals under his watch. Bandits ambush, kidnap farmers, timber workers in forests, coming from a local government and chairman in Nasarawa State. House of Reps to investigate NNPC's failure to remit 2 trillion naira to nation's treasury. Federal lawmakers in the House of Representatives have initiated investigation of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company for intentionally withholding 2 trillion naira of public funds generated as oil revenue during the Muhammadu Buhari administration. You can find more details inside the paper. Nigeria has disappointed Africa and the world, a statement coming from Obasanjo. House of Reps will respond to Nigeria's need, coming from Speaker Abbas. Enugu residents protest IPOB's Monday seat at home. Afenifere outlines 5 steps for Tinubu to avert economic collapse. We hope the president adhere to these 5 steps, and you can find more details of what those 5 steps are in the paper, and that's all the news on Voice of Liberty.
Let's take a look at what the Vanguard newspaper have to say. On the first half of 2023, foreign investment in stock market falls to 40.4% to 145.1 billion naira. You can read more of that for those who are into stock market on page 19. Disclose identity of the hashtag NSAS mass burial victims, Amnesty tells the federal government. Coming from Oshumole, he said, Tinubu not a magician. APC didn't promise overnight solution. You can find that story inside the paper. 4 arrested as Atiku hails operative over fuel terror attack on residents. The big story for the Vanguard is on the ministerial list, anxiety as serving and ex-governors and others pile pressure on Tinubu. APC members urged to remain calm. Governors submit 3 names. Rivers APC leaders split. Tinubu to meet the constitutional provision. Makinde to make nomination. And then we have technocrats, Labour Party, PDP leaders to make lists. Lists out this week, so we keep our fingers crossed for the list. The picture story here we have adverting another doctor strike. We saw in the papers where they gave an ultimatum, so hopefully it will soon elapse, so they are working towards, adverting that. How Nigerian leaders disappointed citizens, Africa, black race, and the war coming from Obasanjo. We have the global principles for fair compensation for publishers by Google, Facebook launch. You can find more of that on page 8. And we also have Musk's rebrand. Twitter replaces the bird logo with X. You can find more. We saw that on the paper yesterday as well. Gas flaring reps to recover over $9 billion fine from oil companies. You can find more of that. We have other column for sports and other stories. You can grab the Vanguard and read detail of any story that is of interest to you.
On Business Day newspaper, cost of living is the big story. Subsidy removal pressure turns on 250 billion naira auto gas fund. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 2. How monetary policy decision of CBN affects you. If you want to know how, find more details on page 30. Competition hots up as pension fund managers consolidate. UBA's share price soars 95% in 1 year. Blue Line Rail stagnates as Lagosians trek. You can find more details on page 31, and that's all the news on Business Day newspaper.
Well, that's how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you so much, Rachel, for doing this with me. Thank you to our crew members. Thank you to our supporters. Thank you to our viewers and also to the Equa executive. Until we come you again tomorrow, do have a blessed day ahead.